Ki mitzion tetze Torah udvar Adonai merushalayim. Ki mitzion tetze Torah udvar Adonai merushalayim. Excuse me. Baruch shenatan Torah le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato. Baruch shenatan Torah le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato. Ya la la la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Ya la la la, ya la la, ya la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la. Baruch shenatan Torah le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato. Baruch shenatan Torah le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato. Now we'll do the blessings. Baruch hu et Adonai hamavorah. Baruch Adonai hamrak le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher natan lanu. Asher bachar banu im kol ha'amin. Ve'natan lanu et Torato. Ruha ad Yashechina notenet HaTorah. Amen. So we're in Parsha Lech Lecha in Genesis. If you need help finding it in your book, let me know and I can help you find it. Yes? Sure. Vayishlach. Vayira. It's right before that. There we go. So for those here, do you need help? No problem. So for folks here, it's also going to be on the screen. And so here's the cool thing about having books in front of us, is that there will be different translations. Got it? Do you need help? That one's a little harder to find. Yeah. You got it? Cool. Okay. So there will be different translations. And sometimes you might hear a translation here and you're like, wait, it says it here. And if it's stirring questions for you, just say, wait a minute. I don't know, why is it translated this way here and there? And we can see if we can figure that out or talk about what that might mean. So those of you who've been here before know that I just jump in with questions and engagements. And so that's where we'll go. I will start just by saying a few words about this. I'm not going to say much right now. So this is the parsha in which God tells Moses to Lech Lecha, to go forth, go out. And there's different translations of Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha can mean go out. I'm sending you to go out, but it can also mean go to yourself, because Lecha. So the mystics and the Kabbalists like to interpret it because they tend to like to do the more mystical, psychological interpretation. They like to do a whole drash, and understanding of it is like Abraham going to himself. I tend to like to do both. I tend to like to think about when we're reading the Torah, because I see Judaism as an integration of individual psycho-spiritual awakening and also collective psycho-spiritual awakening. So I never want to say it's only one or the other. So I like to think of it as Lech Lecha, going within, but also Lech Lecha, going forth out. So we'll explore that and talk about that when we start reading it. So if somebody, we're going to share the screen now. We're in the first book, Bereshit. We're in the book of Genesis. And so the first, I won't do this every time because there'll be too many things to repeat, but we started with Bereshit, the first parsha, which was about the birthing of the world, of cosmic consciousness, of the unfolding of the universe, of God planting with words and calling forth for the earth and the universe to plant the seeds for diversity and expansion and growth. And then human beings were part of that, and then we've screwed it up basically in the next few parshas in that parsha, and since then, right, we had Adam and Eve eating from the tree. Who can blame them? And then we had Cain killing Abel because he got jealous of God being so great, God expressing his gratitude for Abel and ignoring Cain's gifts. If you have a sibling, maybe you can relate to that. And then we had the flood, because the whole earth became corrupted, because human beings became so corrupt that the earth itself was corrupted. Can we understand that today? And God sent forth a flood, and then God made a covenant not only with Noah, not only with human beings, but with all life form on this planet, to never again send forth a flood that would destroy the entire planet. So we can, and then at the end of Noah last week, we had the Tower of Babel, where everybody was speaking one language. They all were in their myopic vision of thinking they all were one, and they knew the right way, and they knew that they were right, and that was the only way to do it. And they were building this massive tower, and God got frustrated and spread them out. And Babel is like confusion. Spread them out across the earth so that they would speak different languages. So I understand that to mean that, again, the God is calling forth an appreciation and a requirement, essentially, that there be diversity on this planet of peoples and all life forms. And so now we're at Lecha. So does somebody want to read? Somebody want to unmute and just start reading? And I will interrupt.
I can.
Thank you.
I have a different translation. It's also the Tanakh. Would you prefer I use the one on the screen?
I do, just so folks
yeah.
looking at that, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
God said to Abram, "Go forth from your native land and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and curse the one who curses you. And all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you." Abram went forth as God had commanded him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran.
I'm going to jump in here.
Yes.
So it starts, right, like God says, "Go forth from your land, and I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be blessed. You shall be a blessing." So I hadn't thought about this before until I was reading it this time. Abraham is, if we remember, is the father of both Ishmael and Isaac and Yitzhak, right? Both the Jewish faith and also the Islamic Muslim faith. So it's really fascinating to me. It says, "Go forth to this land, and then your people will be a great people. I will make you a great people, and you shall spread out along the land." And right now, at this point, there's no distinction. It's just the offspring of Abraham, who doesn't at this point even have any offspring. He's childless still. And yet he's sending him out. He's being sent out from the place where his ancestry is into this new place. And it just made me think about a whole different way to think about how we think about the split of land and the division of land when he's being sent to one land as a father of both peoples. And I hadn't ever reflected on that before. So I invite folks to, if you want to share something, feel free to raise your hand or say something here if you'd like. That was the first thing that jumped out to me here. Yeah.
Well, this is probably outside the text, but just the sort of the whole shape of the story of the founder being sent out. I mean, it's constant in religion and history, whether it's Jesus to the desert or Lenin to the Finland station or, Mao on the Long March. I mean, it's everybody going into something scary and unknown to make a new thing.
Yeah, beautiful. Were you able to hear that online? I'm hearing head shakes. Yes?
No.
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 Okay. Okay, so I'll try to capture it. Roger was saying that it was interesting to note that, like many other leaders, being sent out to this new unknown place to find and create something new. And that happens again in the Torah with Moses too,
Yeah.
and with all the Hebrews, right? We're all sent out. And so, yeah, it's a journey, right? We're sent out. And so that's why I like to look at this as both Lech Lecha to myself and Lech Lecha out, right? If we're being sent to something new, we also have to go in to figure out what from within us we need to heal, leave behind, transform, and bring into the place we're being sent to. Anyone else? I see a hand. Yep. Pamela, I think, and then Debbie. Yeah.
Yeah, so something you just said made me think, oftentimes people use that text that says, I will make of you a great nation, justification for like, was speaking to the Jews, but the Jews weren't Jews yet. It means I didn't think about this, but it does mean all of Abraham's descendants, and that includes all of his children. So thank you for making me think of that, because that does change a lot of things for me as well.
Yeah, I just read it that way because I was preparing. Yep. Thank you. Yeah, Debbie.
And his children include the Christians. So it's the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Anyone else? I see a hand. Sarah.
It also is just another piece of evidence of the land being multicultural and multi-faith from the start.
Exactly.
And being seen that way.
Yeah, it really can throw a wrench into Jewish exceptionalism is how I'm looking at it. Can really help us think about it differently. Yeah, when I looked at it this way, I was like, oh, wait a minute. This is really fascinating. So, yep. Rick, is that your hand? I'm sorry, it's really hard for me to see from here. Yes, Rick. We need you to unmute, though. Rick,
I guess
there you go.
just to repeat what everyone else has said, how revolutionary this new idea is, and why is it that no one else has thought of this, that the sons of Abraham include the Arabic people as well as the Jewish people? And if you think about it, it's astonishing that we don't think about that, and it's only the Jews.
Yeah. So of course, Jews are Arab people too. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm the only one who thought of this. I'm sure I'm not, but it was the first time I thought of it, and I haven't read it elsewhere in my readings, but I'm sure others have thought about that. Yeah, Roger.
Actually, what he asked, I mean, it's often been made very cynical use of, like the Abrahamic Accords. I mean, that was sort of what it's all about. But that's sort of an opportunist, cynical use of the idea.
Right. Yeah. So we're trying to, how do we look at this as I would say, how do we look? So you might remember I've talked a lot about the distinction between blessings and curses. And this was at the end of the Torah that we just finished, right? And often it's interpreted that the curses are the things that happen and the blessings are the blessings that flow. And I have said, upon rereading it, that the way I read it is that the blessing is that you're following the moral path of these divine teachings, and the curse is that you lose your moral way. And then what flows from them are bad things or good things, blessings or curses. But the actual blessing and curse is Are you living a moral life, or are you straying from the moral path? And when you stray from the moral path, you're a curse and you experience curses, if you will. And when you stay on the moral path, you're blessed and you file blessings. And so this to me could be another way of thinking about, there is this blessing Abraham's being given right here. Go forth, find, like, what would it mean for all of us to go forth and find ourselves, right? Heal our traumas, because so some of you, why is Abraham being sent forth? Why does anyone know what happened? Why Abraham's being sent from his land, from his father? There's this wonderful midrash that there's this great midrash on this parsha that Abraham's father, Terah, is an idol worshiper. But he's not just an idol worshiper. He makes and sells idols. You know, so these stone idols. And his father leaves the house one day and he puts his name is Avram at this point. It's not even Abraham. And he puts, and so he's watching over the shop and people come in to buy idols. And so the first one who comes in is this 50-year-old man, and Avram replies to him, "You're 50 years old and you worship an idol that is one day old?" And so the man leaves. He's like completely ashamed. And then a woman enters the store and gives Avram a plate of food to offer to the idols. And Abraham picks up a stick and smashes all the idols except for the largest one. And he puts the stick in the hands, essentially, of this largest idol. And when the father returns home, he says he wants to know what happens. He's destroyed his work, right? Like his earnings, how he's going to make a living. And he wants to know what happens. And Abraham explains that this woman came to offer food to the idols. And he says, and then all the idols start to fight over the food. And the largest one smashed all the other ones. And his father gets enraged and says to him, do they have any knowledge? Right? So his father in this moment is acknowledging, like, these are just idols. They're just stone, right? Do they have any knowledge? And Abraham responds, so those of us who have rebelled against our parents can relate to this. Should not your ears listen to what your mouth is saying? In other words, you know that they're just these objects of stone. Why are you making such a big fuss of it? So Terah seizes Abraham and brings him before Nimrod, the ruler, for punishment. And Nimrod throws Abraham in a fiery furnace, and he emerges from the fire unscathed. And so so Abraham sent forth from this land of idolatry, right? This is this moment. Right? This is where we're at, right? I think all of us who are standing up to the stories of both the United States history and the history of Israel and both of the foundings of these nations and the legacies of oppression and racism and domination and exceptionalism, we're all standing up to these idols, to this idolatry of our ancestors. And we're smashing them. And our fathers, if you will, are saying, no, don't do that. And we're going forth. And it's requiring us to both do some of our own inner work and reflections and to reflect on the world. And like Abraham, it's not such an easy journey. So that's how come he's sent forth. Because he's challenging his father, and his father's got pretty pissed, to say the least. So Neil, I see your hands up.
Yes, I love what I'm hearing, and I'd like to put it in the context that this is something just in the fabric of human consciousness, variations of persons who in a unjust and imbalanced society, even if they were at the top of the food chain and had everything the society had to offer, there was a sense of deep discontent, whether it was Pharaoh's daughter, whether it was Gautama Buddha, whether it was Abraham, and the list goes on and on from there. That sense of, even if you're getting all the consumer prizes of a corrupt society, uh, that sense of fulfillment, meaning, and authenticity is not being met. And as a result of that, throughout history, there have been numerous social movements where it became a work in progress of it wasn't preset of these are the rules, these are the ethos, these are the rituals, but it was created as people walked away from what was clearly a false consciousness and became open to something that felt more authentic. The fellow who writes mythology, Joseph Campbell, has a beautiful volume called The Hero of a Thousand Faces, which is sort of a variation of this thing.
Beautiful. Thank you. Evelyn.
I unmute my audio. I was thinking of the courage that it takes
Mm,
to walk away from the comfort zone.
yeah.
That Abraham is showing, because he could have stayed there and he could have continued with his life, but he had to go into a place not of discomfort, because he was going to be leaving the home, leaving the the known, and going into the unknown.
Yeah. Beautiful. And that's reminding me of other times we've spoken about, like, what allows us to do that, right? Because he's just a human being like us, right? We're all Abraham, we're all Avram. What allows us to look at the past that we've been taught and question it and be willing to embark on exploring it and understanding it, to see a different possibility for the future, but also to understand that the history that we've been taught was mere idolatry, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And this makes me think about the importance of compassion, because, as you just pointed out, it takes courage. And that was true for Abraham, and that's true for any Avrams of today, any of us who are looking at the past and saying, wait a minute, those were idols. Those were lies. Those were things we were given to comfort us. But actually, there's something else that can provide us with safety and security and comfort. And so I always like to say that as we watch others struggle with that, maybe they're standing on the, like, one foot in and one foot out, and they're like, where do I go? As we watch people struggle with that, or even watch people completely resist it, refuse to even envision the possibility of stepping in the abyss, that it takes courage and it takes community and it takes being held and loved, even as you grapple and even as you resist. Because no one's going to take a leap of faith without some comfort. And Avram had the comfort of the divine. And so not all people are going to find comfort in the divine, right? That's a big stretch. That's a big ask, right? It's not tangible. We don't touch it. Like, maybe some of us actually hear the divine speak to us, but it's probably not many of us. And so who do we turn to? Who can we rely on when we're trying to cross that abyss? And how can we support others in that journey? So thanks for bringing that up, that courage that it takes. Yeah. John.
Thank you, Rabbi Kat. I mean, I just wanted to say first how liberating and beautiful this discussion is, and how can we all take this, challenging, going forth and challenging idolatry of imperialism and in the way history is constructed. I think for me, in reading this parsha this year, and just even these first few verses, I also, and I'm sorry if this is too pessimistic, but I just felt this incredible sense of foreboding and dread seeing Lot mentioned and knowing that pretty soon Saddam and Amorah are going to have fire rain down on them, and then seeing Shechem mentioned and knowing in a few hundred years that Abraham's grandchildren will commit this genocidal massacre there. And also thinking, what does it mean that right now we're at a time when those things haven't happened? And what is the courage that could have been used to have a different outcome, and how to even think from where we are now, obviously not in a moment where we're in a moment where horrible things are already happening. And so what does it mean that we're right now at this point where there could have been a different outcome in those things, if we take them more as things that have happened and less as like some kind of personal metaphor, I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, really important questions. Yeah, what are the opportunities that lie before us, and what can we take from our Torah to help us choose to be a blessing, choose to stand in moral integrity, even in fear, even in our trauma, choose to be courageous and not allow our trauma and our fear to overtake us, and also to not allow it to be weaponized, or at least not to find ourselves being wrapped up in the weaponization of it. I don't think we can stop it from being weaponized, but we can speak to the idolatry of that. Thank you. How about Catherine and then Kayla? Okay, so Catherine or Philip, I'm not sure who's raising a hand here, but hi guys.
Hi, so it's me this time. So I just want to raise a couple of points. There have been a number of people writing about how Abraham is sort of the founder of three major religions. I have a friend who's a professor at UCLA who's written about this, has a book about it. Her name is Carol Bakos. I have in my hand here a book called The Tent of Abraham. It's written by Joan Chittister, who is a Christian, and Rabbi Arthur Waskow, who's Jewish, and Murshad Christie, who's Muslim, writing about that theme.
Yeah.
Then the other thing I wanted to say is about the story of Abraham and his trauma at his home and getting thrown into the furnace is Michael Lerner writes about it in Jewish Renewal, and he tells the story of how the trauma that occurred to Abraham was he himself repeated it in the incident on the mountain with his son, where he almost killed him and then didn't, and he writes about it in a very compelling way that anyone interested would probably be well rewarded from reading that particular account of the story. That it's not the common account of it in the little that I know anyway. It's a much more rewarding telling than what one normally hears.
Yeah.
So I just want to put that out there.
Thank you. Yeah, so when I was saying that I haven't read that people have read this part about Abraham going to the land, meaning that the land was for all the peoples. That's what I was referring to. Not that Abraham wasn't the father of all peoples. That's a well-known, that's many people. We all agree on that idea anyway. And on High Holidays, I did actually teach more about Rabbi Lerner's teaching on this parsha, which is really lovely. Thank you for raising those up. I appreciate that. I think we're now at you, Kayla. Just speak loudly because you're far from the mic, please.
I guess what came up for me when I initially was hearing these first these first verses was like just this like feeling that this was like this kind of manifest destiny, actually kind of call from God. Like, go forth from where you're from and go into this place where I will show you that people already live and you're going to be great. You know, this is for you. And I just think it was like so interesting to hear this, like, that, you know, Abram is like, his options seem very limited at this time. You know, he maybe can't stay like in the place of his father, and he's, you know, also received this divine message. But what does that mean in terms of colonization and like also having, you know, go forth be a kind of this like fundamental message of so many religious and cultural or like ethnic traditions, but that is also a message of go forth and colonize, go forth and go to this place where people already live.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Were you able to hear that? Yes. Okay, cool. Ari, good morning.
So I'm going to put it in conversation with the recent elections in the United States because I'm struggling with that this weekend. And so I think this, what you said, Kat, and others have, it resonated with others, the idea that this Lech Lecha, go forth, is this inner going forth and this outer going forth. So I think if I put it in conversation with the recent elections, we have someone who was elected who has said he will use military force against political opponents. You know, he said that he'll fire, you know, thousands and thousands of career public servants. He said that he'll deport millions of immigrants, and there'll be like military like roundups to do that. So I think we have to be, I think this Lech Lecha is turning in and being vigilant about what all of those threats mean, and also Lech Lecha outward into the streets and form movements and do the work and the heavy lifting. Should he bring this all to fruition? Should he act on what he said he's going to act? So I've taken it completely out of the stories and pulled it into the conversation with today, because that's what I have to deal with.
Yeah.
In Texas, basically, you know, was where I live for the last 10 years. This is going to uninhibit. All the guardrails are going to go down in Texas, you know, since it's just going to get worse here if he starts to act the way he says he will behave. So that's it. That's what sorry it's so dark. Yeah.
No, that's where we are. Yes, thank you. Yeah, John.
I just keep thinking of how much this story is used to justify the separation of Jews and Muslims. And that has been such the narrative, as opposed to seeing what the consequences of this separation were. And that perhaps the lesson is that the separation is the wound that has to be healed. That we get this continuing story of generational trauma on and on and on. And I just keep seeing this initial separation, and perhaps even the separation from his father, and the leaving his original land as, you know, part of this, that we separate, and so to speak, we have to create home. But when we create home, we often cast other people out to create it. And how do we create home without casting anyone out?
Amen. Well, and as you were saying, Kayla, like an interesting piece of this is we say that, right? So much of the story of our people is that this was a covenant with the divine for us to have this land, but it's not the land where he was born, right? It's a different land. It is, in fact, you're going to another people's land. I have an interpretation when it talks about going there that it's not actually early in the Torah where it says you will conquer and send them out and murder them and take their stuff. It actually just says other people are living there and you'll go live there too. It's a different way of that you can read it earlier on in the Torah. Later in the Torah, it's clear where it's saying very horrific stuff, but not so much so early in the Torah.
It's just so important how we read the story and the narratives that get, and we have to question perhaps these origin narratives that people cling to so hard to justify why something belongs to us, not just in Torah, but that happens over and over again, I think, in history.
Amen. And then what, and what can we learn instead of reading it as truth? It always to me is, what can we learn from the mistakes made or the choices made that allow us to make different choices in our lifetimes, which I think is what many of you were pointing to. So thank you. Anyone else? You haven't even gotten through 3 lines, I don't think. Look how much we unpacked. Okay, we can keep going now. Thank you all. I forget who was reading, but who's ever reading, if you're open for continuing to read, please go for it.
Sure, I can keep reading about my namesake. Abraham took his wife Sarai. Oh wait, I think I already read that, didn't I? About
okay, read again.
Sarai. Yes. Okay. Abram took his wife Sarai and his brother's son Lot, and all the wealth that they had amassed, and the persons that they had acquired in Haran. And they set out for the land of Canaan. When they arrived in the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land as far as the site of Shechem and the terebinth of Moreh. The Canaanites were in the land. God appeared to Abram and said, I will assign this land to your offspring. And he built an altar there to God who had appeared to him. From there, he moved on to the hill country east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on his west and Ai on the east. And he built there an altar to God and invoked God by name. Then Abram journeyed by stages toward the Negeb. There was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. And as he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, I know what a beautiful woman you are. If the Egyptians see you and think she is my wife, they will kill me and let you live. Please say that you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that I may remain alive thanks to you.
I'm going to interrupt here. So last week, if you remember, we had a discussion about Noach being righteous for his generation. And we had this, and the rabbis talk about, well, if Noach had been alive in Avram's generation, he wouldn't have been so righteous. And part of the reason is, they say, because Noach argued with God when God was going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. But I would argue there's a problem here. Because Avram here is basically telling his wife to say you're my sister, so that, which means she's going to be, in a moment, you're going to, they bring her into the Pharaoh's courtier, into the Pharaoh's palace. And so that means she's going to become part of his harem, let's say. And Avram apparently is fine with that as long as he lives. And so it makes me wonder, we uplift Avram as such a righteous person, and yet, at least in terms of patriarchy, he still seems quite flawed to me. And of course, this was a long time ago, so it's not surprising. But I think it's important for us to acknowledge that one of the things that's so great about our Torah is our ancestors are deeply flawed, and it's all there for us to read about and grapple with. None of them are pure, actually. Anyone want to share any thoughts before we continue?
I'm noticing.
Go ahead. One sec. Someone. Yeah. Tell me your name.
I'm Anne.
Hi, Anne.
Hi. I'm noticing it's a very circuitous route that he's taking to the land. Like it's like he goes up here and then he goes down here and then down to Egypt and yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, that like leaving Egypt.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's never a straight shot. I think I see another hand. John, is that a new hand?
That's a new hand. I find it amazing that immediately after God says that he is assigning Avram the land, and I like that translation of assigning. There's a lot to unpack in that, but immediately Avram fears for his life when he goes to Egypt, arguably with a people that he doesn't really know, and assumes what's going to happen, which is in direct contradiction to what God has just told him. Because the land couldn't be assigned to him and his ancestors if he was dead. So it's just, I wonder how much of this is also about suspicion of othering, his suspicion of how the Egyptians are going to treat him and his wife.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And kind of does in that show like, oh wait, does he really have faith? Yeah, thank you for that. Anyone else? Okay, we can keep going. Sarah, thank you.
Sorry, I thought the mouse on the screen was mine. There we go. And because of her, it went well with Abram. He acquired sheep, oxen, donkeys, male and female slaves, jennies, and camels. But God afflicted Pharaoh and his household with mighty plagues on account of Sarai, the wife of Abram. Pharaoh sent for Abram and said, "What is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her as my wife? Now, here is your wife. Take her and be gone." And Pharaoh put some men in charge of him, and they sent him off with his wife and all that he possessed.
I'm just noticing here something when I think about the story in Exodus with a different Pharaoh. And they start having these plagues, and still that Pharaoh in Exodus doesn't like send them off right away. It takes a whole bunch of plagues and a whole bunch of hardening of hearts. And in the Exodus story, of course, the Hebrews are slaves, and they're part of the structure of the success of the society. They're necessary for the perpetuation of the Egyptian empire. But here, not so much yet. Mark, I see a hand.
Yes.
Good morning.
Boker Tov, all good. Yes, Boker Tov indeed. Do we know how Pharaoh found out that Sarah was his wife and not his sister? Was that divined in Pharaoh's court, or is it implied that Sarah tell him when she was in their bedchamber or something?
That's a great question. No, like how did Pharaoh know that? Yeah, Pharaoh just figured it out somehow.
It'd be interesting if Sarah was the one, like at the point of, being forced into concubine duty, say, look, I mean, if she was the one that actually was brave enough to tell him versus whether the court wazirs, divined it some other way. I would be curious. I'll have to look for midrash on that.
Yeah, we could probably find a feminist midrash that said Sarah's
Yes.
Wait, go attack Avram. What it actually says here is that Pharaoh was afflicted, right? There was all these things that happened. It doesn't like list
right.
things, but so then I guess maybe in Pharaoh's mind he thought, well, everything was going well until they arrived, and now it's not going well, so it must have to be Sarah being his wife and not his sister. But yeah, we don't know. Yeah, Roger. Thanks for that question, Mark.
Just to ask about this. I mean, it looks like he was pimping his wife, calling her a sister so he could pretend she was a virgin. but so he could get favors and work his way into
Yeah.
the gift. So
Yeah. I appreciate you calling it pimping. Yeah, he was. He was definitely giving off his wife to be in the harem. Yep. And there you go. And of course, we didn't even pause when it said, and he left his father's land with all this stuff, including the people he acquired, right? The slaves. Right? Like, it's really important to me we name things in the real way that they are, the slaves. So pimping his wife was a great way to say that. Yes, I mean, horrific, but accurate. I see a hand. Neil.
Yes, I'm very excited that there's a lot of people new to our reading. So I'd like to offer that while looking at Genesis, there are certain punctuators of foreshadowing: famine in the land, delayed birth, digging of a well. These are all, when this is introduced, there's going to be a significant pivot in both the social dynamics and the integration of consciousness. And that's just a good tracker for reading Genesis.
Thank you, Neil. I don't see any other hands. Mark, I think you were done. Am I right? Great, thank you. Okay. Sarah, unless.
Yes. You want me to read again?
Thank you.
Okay. From Egypt, Abram went up into the Negeb with his wife and all that he possessed, together with Lot. Now Abram was very rich in cattle, silver, and gold, and he proceeded by stages from the Negeb as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been formerly, between Bethel and Ai, the site of the altar that he had built there at first. And there Abraham invoked God by name. Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, so that the land could not support them staying together, for their possessions were so great that they could not remain together. And there was quarreling between the herders of Abram's cattle and those of Lot's cattle. The Canaanites and Perizzites were then dwelling in the land. Abram said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between you and me, between my herders and yours, for we are, after all, kin. Is not the whole land before you? Let us separate. If you go north, I will go south, and if you go south, I will go north." Lot looked about him and saw how well watered was the whole plain of the Jordan, all of it. This was before God had destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah all the way to Zoar, like the garden of God, like the land of Egypt. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan, and Lot journeyed eastward. Thus they parted from each other. Abram remained in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled in the cities of the plain, pitching his tents near Sodom. Now the inhabitants of Sodom were very wicked and sinners against God. And God said to Abram after Lot had parted from him, "Raise your eyes and look out from where you are to the north and south, to the east and west. For I give all the land that you see to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, then your offspring too can be counted. Up, walk about the land, through its length and its breadth, for I give it to you." And Abram moved his tent and came to dwell at the terebinths of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and he built an altar there to God.
And again, Abraham still doesn't have children, so the offspring to whom this land is going is, as we've said, all the offspring of Avram.
Right.
And as you point out, it's also a manifest destiny, taking the land.
Yeah.
Problematic story. Now, although it doesn't yet say We'll get there. We'll get there. It doesn't yet say you're going to kill everyone in the land. Okay, you good reading still?
Well, I don't know how to pronounce all these names. So if there's somebody who does, they can take the helm.
Somebody else want to take the helm? You go. You have to go this way.
I mean, I could try. I don't know how to pronounce the names either, but I'm willing to try.
Go for it.
Good. Yay.
Okay. Now, when King Amraphel of Shinar, King Arioch of Elasar, King Sherdor Lamer of Elam, and King Tadal of Goim made war on King Bera of Sodom, King Birsha of Gomorrah, King Shinab of Admah, King Shemeber of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. All the latter joined forces in the valley of Siddim, now the Dead Sea. 12 years they served Sherdor Lamer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, Sherdor Lamer and the kings who were with him came and defeated Rephaim at Ashtaroth Karanim, the Zuzim at Ham, the Emim at Shavet Kirwayathaim, and the Horites in their hill country of Seir as far as El Paran, which is by the wilderness. On the way back, they came to En Mishpat, which is Kadesh, and subdued all the territory of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites who dwelt in Hazazon Tamar. Then the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar, went forth and engaged them in battle in the valley of Siddim. King Shedor Lamer of Elam, King Tadal of Goim, King Amraphel of Shinar, and King Arioch of Elasar, 4 kings against 5, those 5. Now the valley of Siddim was dotted with bitumen pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, in their flight, threw themselves into them, while the rest escaped to the hill country. The invaders seized all the wealth of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions and went their way. They also took Lot, the son of Abraham's brother, and his possessions, and departed, for he had settled in Sodom. A fugitive brought the news to Abram, the Hebrew, who was dwelling in the terebinth of Mamre, the Amorite, kingsman of Eshcol and Aner, these being Abram's allies. When Abram heard that his kinsmen had been taken captive, he mustered his retainers, born into the household, numbering 318, and went to pursuit as far as Dan. At night, he and his servants deployed them, and he pursued them as far as Hobar, which is north of Damascus. He brought back all the possessions. He also brought back his kinsman Lot and his possessions, and the women and the rest of the people. When he returned from defeating Shedor or Lamer and the kings with him, hold on, sorry. The king of Sodom came out to meet him in the valley of Shaveh, which is the valley of the king. And the king Melchizedek of Salam brought our bread and wine. He was a priest of God Most High. He blessed him, saying, "Blessed be Abram of God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your foes into your hand." And Abram gave him 1/10 of everything. Then the king of Sodom said to Abram, "Give me the persons and take the possessions for yourself." But Abram said to the king of Sodom, "I swear to the eternal, God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, I will not take so much as a thread or a sandal strap of what is yours, You shall not say, it is I who made Abram rich. For me, nothing but what my servants have used up, as far as the share of who went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their share. Sometime later, the word of God came to Abram in a vision. Fear not, Abram. I am a shield to you. Your reward shall be very great. But Abram said, O my sovereign God, what can you give me, seeing that I shall die childless, and the one in charge of my household is Damasek Eliezer? Abram said further, since you have granted me no offspring, my steward will be my heir. The word of God came to him in reply, that one shall not be your heir. None but your very own issue shall be your heir. Then in the vision, God took him outside and said, look toward heaven and count the stars. If you are able to count them, continuing, so shall your offspring be. And he put his trust in God, who reckoned it to his merit. Then God said to him, I am God who brought you out from Ur of the Chaldeans to assign this land to you as a possession. And he said, O my sovereign God, how shall I know that I am to possess it? Came the reply, bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old she-goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young bird. He brought all of these and cut them in two, placing each half opposite the other, but he did not cut up the bird. Birds of prey came down upon the carcasses, and Abram drove them away. As the sun was about to set, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and a great dark dread descended upon him. And God said to Abram, know well that your offspring shall be strangers in a land not theirs, and they shall be enslaved and oppressed 400 years. But I will execute judgment on the nation they shall serve, and in the end they shall go free with great wealth. As for you, you shall go to your ancestors in peace. You shall be buried at a ripe old age. And they shall return here in the 4th generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. When the sun set and it was very dark, there appeared a smoking oven and a flaming torch that passed between those pieces. On that day, God made a covenant with Abram. To your offspring I assign this land, from the river of the Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Kadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jeshuites. Sarai, Adam's wife, had borne him no children. She had an Egyptian maidservant whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said to Abram, look, God has kept me from bearing. Consort with my maid, perhaps I shall have a child through her. And Abram heeded Sarah's request. So Sarai, Abram's wife, took the maid Hagar, the Egyptian, after Abram had dwelt in the land of Canaan 10 years, and gave her to her husband Abram as a concubine. He cohabited with Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw she had conceived, her mistress was lowered in her esteem. And Sarai said to Abram, the wrong done me is your fault. I myself put my maid in your bosom. Now that she sees she is pregnant, I am lowered in her esteem. God decide between you and me. Abram said to Sarai, your maid is in your hands. Deal with her as you think right. Then Sarai treated her harshly, and she ran away from her. An angel of God found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the road to Shur, and said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going? And she said, I am running away from my mistress, Sarai. And the angel of God said to her, go back to your mistress and submit to her harsh treatment. And the angel of God said to her, I will greatly increase your offspring, and they shall too be many to count. too many to count. The angel of God said to her further, behold, you are pregnant and shall bear a son. You shall call him Ishmael, for God has paid heed to your suffering. He shall be as a wild ass of a person, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. He shall dwell alongside all his kin. And she called God, who spoke to her, you are El Roi, for which she meant, have I not gone on seeing after my being seen? Therefore the well was called Bir Lahai Roi. It is between Kadesh and Perid. Hagar bore a son to Abram, and Abram gave the son that Hagar bore him the name Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here for a moment. So much problematic here. I don't know where to start. I was glad that it called her a slave. It also in the Hebrew actually says Isha. She gave, in the Hebrew, she actually becomes his wife, which has some power, even as she is a slave. So I'm noticing, I'm feeling really curious about this message of return to your mistress and submit yourself to her domination. It's reminding me of the story of Esther, where Esther is sold into sex slavery. We don't normally tell the story that way, but that's literally what happens. Bless you. And then to make ourselves feel better, we say, well, you were born for this moment. And I'm noticing this is a similar message here, like return to your mistress, have your child. Of course, she gets kicked out later, so why she has to return and submit to this abuse? Why not just go into the desert now and God save her now? Why does she have to go back and take more abuse? And then, then you will have this abundance. Your offspring will have this abundance. And this is, I mean, I'm not going to say this for certain, but in my recall, at least, it's only women who are said, go take the abuse and then, you'll have this abundant blessing, or you'll be in a place where you'll be able to save your people. This is your moment. I find that a very problematic story, a very problematic message. Like, your abuse is part of the unfolding of the greatness of you or your people. And it's never really the greatness of you, actually, right? It's the greatness of your people and the future generations. And I want to rewrite this story. I want to rewrite this part. How might we rewrite this? The other thing I want to just raise up here is El Roi, the God, the seeing God, the one that sees you. So in the Torah, there's many different names for God. In a moment in chapter 17, you'll see it says El Shaddai. Shaddaiim are breasts. So I like to think of like the nurturing or breasted God, the one that offers nurturance. And here Hagar has the God that sees her. And when Abraham sends her out, it's El Roi that she sees again and hears again. And I love the fact that Hagar, the slave of Sarai, who is not a Hebrew, also speaks to God and hears God. And that's really a beautiful thing, too. Ari, please.
So again, to reiterate, this going forth, this Lech Lecha, this inner journey and outer journey would be something that we'd have to continuously return to, the way I'm seeing it now. And I think that a way to rewrite it, I'm not going to tell you the storyline here, but would be from all of the subaltern and oppressed positionings in all of the, in all of the story and others have to be written and rewritten continuously. So that's all.
Right. Right. That's the beautiful thing about Midrashim is retelling our stories, pulling out the white spaces between the black letters. John, I believe.
Yeah, there's so much in this last passage about the breaking of trust, or the requirement of like contracting in these relationships. And I put something in the chat just about that. God promised all this again to Avram, and Avram again doubted to the point that he needed proof. And that's when the animal sacrifices came down. And there's something for me about relationships of contract versus relationships of trust and inherent violence somehow in these kind of compacts, versus just connected, compassionate relationships. And after that, we see all these relationships just get more and more harmful.
That's really beautiful, John. Thank you for that. Yeah, and I want to acknowledge that I think the Torah is a representation of human beings, right? It's written by human beings, so I think it's also a reflection that all of us struggle with holding on to trust in relationships and want some manifestation of something concrete, something to be tangible that helps us sustain trust. And so the sacrifices are that, right? Like somehow they become some way to believe in a God that is so really in many ways unbelievable, right? Evelyn.
I'm really struck here. It seems like Abraham has more compassion here than Avram, than Sarai. And we usually connect the compassion with the side of the female. And I'm wondering, how do we understand that in terms of and also Avram not being willing to stand up for what he believes in, that allowing it to happen, that that Hagar could be sent out. So it's just not clear to me.
Yeah,
this issue.
Yeah, I'm reading it not necessarily as more compassion, but rather as not wanting to take responsibility. So he's Sarai to take responsibility. She's your, I mean, essentially, he's saying she's your slave. I just had sex with her. I just raped her to have a child that you wanted me to have. That let's acknowledge Abraham for sure wanted it too. But she's your property. You decide what to do with her. I'm not necessarily reading it as compassion, but rather as that's yours to deal with, Sarai. And where he could turn to her and say, I love you, darling. The fact that she's given birth, the fact that she's pregnant doesn't take away my love from you. Why are you feeling threatened? I mean, he could even exploit the power dynamic and say, once she gives birth to this child, it says your child, because that's really what the contract is here. Sarah's feeling demeaned. I mean, is there any question, really, if you think about a slave, that Sarai was already treating her harshly and demeaning? She allowed Avram to rape her. It's not like she was held in great esteem. And I think maybe Hagar is now pregnant with child and said, I have to get out of here to protect my child. It's an ugly story. Kayla, did you want to say something? Is that a hand?
Yeah.
And then I see someone else's hand. Yeah, loud, please.
I've like sunk into this corner.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I just feel the need to echo that the trauma in this story is really disturbing, and also
Yeah.
I feel like I'm having this like zoomed out reaction of like, it feels like the way that time is being written about is so kind of scattered. Like we're going from like all this time passing to like a specific moment to, you know, God says your offspring are going to be enslaved for 400 years. Like we're going like way into the future as well.
Yeah.
And even into like the Sodom and Gomorrah, like, oh, that the text is like, that hasn't happened yet. And I find that to be like an interesting, I don't know, it's kind of like scattered is the best word I have for it. And it feels also like the relationships feel very scattered as well. And the also relationship with God of like, God kind of shows up and is like, I got you, and then disappears for 15 years again. And here we have people who are like 80, in their 80s, and God has said to them, you're gonna have children, and they still haven't had children. Like there's this like almost like traumatic anxiety, I feel like it's coming from the kind of way that time is being like all over the place. And that, like someone was talking about trust, like that feels like a big piece to me too, of like, I don't know, there's not a kind of like a trust in the future.
Yeah.
Or the moment that exists even. It's just like everything's all over the place.
Yeah. A lot of fear and uncertainty. Yeah. Thank you. So there was, I think there were maybe two hands. I see Pamela and one other. I don't know what order that was in, but Pamela, go ahead, and then.
Yeah. What I don't understand, I mean, I know later on, you know, after Isaac is born, it's still awful, but it makes a little more sense that she sent Hagar away because of the inheritance thing. But right now, it was her idea. It played out exactly the way she wanted. She wanted to have a child. She sent Hagar to Abraham. What is she angry about? You know, everything went exactly. It was her idea. Everything went exactly the way she wanted. I guess it doesn't understand. Like, you know, she got the baby. Everything. You know, this is what she asked Abraham to do.
Don't you ever regret something you asked for and created it? I think it's very human.
I guess so. You know, be careful what you ask for, kind of thing. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Think about, right? She only thought about, I need to have a child, and she's the one who's going to give me the child because I'm too old or I can't have a child. And then she didn't think about, wait a minute, how am I going to feel if she gets pregnant and she feels special or better, or I feel less than because I couldn't have a child? So let's think about the historical time, which in some circles isn't so different today. Like women having babies was kind of what women were supposed to be doing. And when you have a child in that time of history, you're uplifted. That's like you have more power and more respect. So she's wanting a child, but she didn't think about, oh, wait a minute. She gets pregnant, she's going to have that respect, not me. So she kind of like, yeah, she 2020 hindsight.
Yeah, buyer's regret.
Didn't think about how she'd feel. Yeah. I think Sarah has her hand up.
Yeah. I think about, like, I've done some historical critical study of the Bible and the Torah, and you know, this story comes from a time when these are like the stories that our religious and actual like biological ancestors told around the fires. You know, this is they the Torah comes from the greatest hits of the storytelling of the people. So on another layer, I think of like how unfair, sexist, and harsh was life that it made them tell the story in this way, that this story took shape and became what we said about our ancestors, about our first people, maybe to explain these strange people on this other side who have some resentment for us, those Ishmaelites, or, you know, that kind of story. It's just, and then of course, once it becomes canon, then we use it to try to explain other things, and it can limit us too, if we have these locked in interpretations about how we're supposed to be and who we're supposed to be.
Yes, beautiful. Yeah, Roger.
I'd like to speak in defense of these characters.
Let's speak a little louder.
I'd like to speak in defense of these characters. I mean, of course, like it's history written by victors. It's history written by patriarchal despots, you know, later. And so sure, but in this context, I don't feel I can judge them, because I live in a society where the difference between the privileged and the unprivileged in the world is vast compared to what it was then. So, you know, Avram's life chances by today's standards are not all that much different than Hagar's. And we're talking about a society where things are arranged so that slaves are owned, including sexual slaves, including, you know, sort of birthing units, you know, like, I mean, which is what Hagar was. So in this case, they're following rules. And in one way, you could say, when Avram tells Sarai, you know, you can do what you want with her, he's respecting Sarai. He's respecting her rights in the context of that society, and recognizing that she has a certain degree of power and a certain status. So I don't know. I don't feel superior to any of these people, and I don't feel like in the society that I live that their sexism and their exploitation of one another is particularly worse than what feeds me. You know. So yeah.
Thanks for that perspective. Yeah, Neil, and then I want to just finish the parsha because we only have one more chapter, but it's not long. So Neil, yeah.
Yes, one of the beauties of Midrash is to provide alternative views and more fleshed out perspectives. It's been a couple of decades, so I don't recall the details of it, but I want to put in a plug for the Midrash called the Red Tent, which basically was the subjective experience of Sarah in regard to both the family of origin and the early history that gave rise prior to the way these stories were described in Genesis.
Thank you. Okay, so Pamela, you were reading, right? We're going to just read to the end because we're so close.
Okay, I was. Would you like me to continue? Okay. When Abram was 99 years old, God appeared to Abram and said to him, I am El Shaddai. Walk in my ways and be blameless. I will establish my covenant between me and you, and I will make you exceedingly numerous. Abram threw himself on his face, and God spoke to him further. As for me, this is my covenant with you. You shall be a father of multitude of nations. There we go. Multiple. And you shall no longer be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham. For I shall make you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fertile and make nations of you, and kings shall come forth from you. I will maintain my covenant between me and you and your offspring to come as an everlasting covenant throughout the ages, to be God to you and to your offspring to come. I assign the land you sojourn into you and your offspring to come, all the land of Canaan, as an everlasting holding. I will be their God. God further said to Abraham, as for you, you and your offspring to come throughout the ages shall keep my covenant. Such shall be the covenant between me and you, and wait till you finish moving it, and your offspring to follow, that you shall keep. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and that of the sign of the covenant between me and you. And throughout the generations, every male among you shall be circumcised at the age of 8 days. As for the homeborn slave and the one brought from an outsider who is not your offspring, they must be circumcised, homeborn and purchased alike. Thus shall my covenant be marked in your flesh as an everlasting pact. And if any male who is uncircumcised fails to circumcise the flesh of his foreskin, that person shall be cut off from kin. He has broken my covenant. And God said to Abraham, as for your wife Sarai, you shall not call her Sarai, but her name shall be Sarah. I will bless her. Indeed, I will give you a son by her. I will bless her so that she shall give rise to nations. Rulers of people shall issue from her. Abraham threw himself on his face and laughed, as he said to himself, can a child be born to a man of 100 years old? Or can Sarah bear a child at 90? And Abraham said to God, oh, that Ishmael shall live by your favor. God said, nevertheless, Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you shall name him Isaac, and I will maintain my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring to come. As for Ishmael, I have heeded you. I hereby bless him. I make him fertile and exceedingly numerous. He shall be the father of 12 chieftains, and I shall make of him a great nation. But my covenant will maintain with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this season next year. Done speaking with him, gone was God from Abraham. Then Abraham took his son Ishmael and his homeborn slaves and those he had bought, and every male in Abraham's household, and he circumcised the flesh of their foreskins on that very day, as God had spoken to him. Abraham was 99 years old when he circumcised the flesh of his foreskin, and his son Ishmael was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. Thus Abraham and his son Ishmael were circumcised on that very day, and all his household, his homeborn slaves, and those that had been bought from outsiders were circumcised with him.
Oh, that's the end. Thank you. Woo. Okay. Take a deep collective breath. We'll leave it there. And we will pick up next week with some more reflections. And we'll do the closing blessings and closing prayers. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata betochenu bracha aya shechinah notenet haTorah. Amen.